Hi there everybody once again and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be talking about the histogram. And do you really use your histogram while taking photos, landscape photos, portrait photos, any other photo? I'm talking about the histogram on your camera. Using the histogram on your camera is the most effective way to ensure your photos are properly exposed. Now let me explain a bit about the histogram. A histogram is a graphical representation of the tonal values of your image. It shows the distribution of pixels in your image from the dark side, the left side, the high side, the highlights on the right side. Left side represents shadows and blacks. The middle represents midtones or grays. Right side represents highlights and whites. If your histogram indicates underexposure bunched all to the left side, you can increase your exposure by number one, increasing the ISO, opening up your aperture, a lower f-stop, or by slowing down the shutter speed. Now this can get a bit tricky once you're out on the field, especially in the mornings and during sunsets and sunrises, since your exposure is always changing. If your histogram is bunched all the way to the right, you can then decrease your exposure, like I said, by ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. On each side of the histogram, you will have clippings for the highlights and clippings for the shadows or blacks. You have to keep in mind while taking a photo, always check your clippings of highlights and blacks. Once they are clipped, you cannot adjust them in post. They'll be overexposed or underexposed. I know I'm talking a lot and maybe you're not understanding, so the best thing we can do about this, we'll go down and take a couple of shots by the sea somewhere, and I will show you on location how I adjust my histogram to get the perfect exposure and the perfect shot. Believe me, when you get used to the histogram, that is the only thing you'll be relying on. You cannot get a perfect exposure without using the histogram.
Hi there, I'm on my way to take a couple of shots and I'll be showing you how to adjust your histogram when you're on location. When you get used to this method, you will always be stuck on this method. It's one of the best methods you can use for perfect exposure, and I hope you understand what I'm saying. If you don't, just leave any comments below and I'll answer them. Thank you guys, and I'll see you there. Bye. Hi guys, we're on location to test the camera's histogram. I'll be showing you how to use the histogram. We'll be taking a couple of shots and I'll be showing you the adjustments I use to get a perfect exposure. My camera's all set up, two cameras. And let's begin.
Well, here we have both cameras set up. I'll be showing you the histogram now. Here it is. We'll be taking some photos on the opposite side. Right, so right now we have a perfect exposure. We have everything bunched, spread out evenly on both sides in the middle. We don't have any clippings here on the highlights, and these are the shadows. And I'm going to show you, if we don't have a perfect exposure, what you need to do. You can either adjust the ISO, the aperture, or the shutter speed. Mostly in landscape photography, we set the aperture on one setting. F8 up to F11 are the best settings, the sweet spot of the lens. And just imagine we started off at around F16. As you can see, we're bunched all to the left. We have clipped shadows or blacks, and you can see the exposure overall is not very good. But I want to stay on F8. So I set my aperture here to F8. Settings on all other cameras, Nikon, Sony, are all the same. I'm turning the dial. As you can see, my histogram is moving to the right. I'm letting more light in, and I'm on F8. If I want a longer shutter speed, I turn the shutter speed dial even more, but we're going to get more bunching to the left. If that happens, then you need to increase your ISO from here. Around 400, and we're now bunched all the way to the right. I'm going to dial it down a bit, the shutter speed, and you can see we're going back to a normal perfect exposure. Now if you're clipped all the way to the right, you can see the histogram has clippings. You can see it, even the picture is blown out. So obviously you're going to either reduce your f-stop. You're going to choose a higher number. And we're back to there. But like I said in the beginning, if you want to stick with F8 and you get the clippings, you're going to have to dial down your exposure again. You can play around with the ISO or the exposure if you want your setting F8 to stay on F8, your aperture. If you want a higher shutter speed, you're going to turn it higher. You can see it's going higher, but it's going to go all the way to the left. You're going to have clippings on the shadows and blacks. So there, you're going to need to let in more light. You can either go down, open up the aperture more. You can see that's the furthest I can go on this length. If you need to adjust more the histogram, then you're going to have to increase your ISO even more. Go in increments, and there we have it. It's set at 500, 5.6, and my shutter speed is 1/1050. But mostly for landscapes, we always choose the aperture first. So I'm going to start from the beginning. My aperture is 5.8. I want to set it to f8 or maybe f11, but it's gone bunched all the way to the left. So what I need to do is decrease the exposure, which will let in more light until you see your histogram moving where you don't have any clippings on either side. And there we have our perfect exposure. If you want, you can decrease the ISO so you don't have any more noise, which I usually leave around 100. But then we're going back, punching all the way to the left. So I need to open up my aperture more. So I want my aperture on f11. I don't want to budge it from there, and I want my ISO on 100 to reduce noise. So my only choice is to increase the shutter speed. Sorry, to decrease the shutter speed. And you can see it's moving in the middle of the histogram. And there we have a perfect exposure again. When you're decreasing your shutter speed, you have to be careful not to go below 1/60 or 1/50. I mean under 1/60 or under 1/50. Because then you're going to get blurry image. I suggest always in landscape photography, always use a tripod. And there you're going to risk less chance of blurry images. So that's our tutorial for today. I hope you understood it. Please leave any comments below so I can explain maybe more. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and make sure to hit that subscribe button and the thumbs up. I'm going to take one image before we go, and you can see how perfect it's going to be. Here we go. 2-second timer. And there we have our perfect image. Everything is sharp and a perfect exposure. So remember guys, always try to get an even histogram, or even better, move more to the left, to the right of your histogram. You can always retrieve in post the highlights unless they are blown out completely, rather than having shadows which will just increase your noise. So remember, push more to the right until you see clippings. If you see clippings, just dial back a bit more. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in another video.